Despite Tottenham Hotspur winning the league the other week with their 2-2 win at the Emirates, we have somehow ended up with exactly the same record as them. 7 played, 5 wins, 2 draws, goal difference of 9, 17 points. It's incredible, really, given the conversations around them at the minute. Apparently, it's not a new manager bounce if it's at the beginning of the season. Joking aside, that difference in perception of the same outcome that I'm sensing feels fairly understandable. The fact is, expectations are different for Arsenal and Spurs. They're 7 league games into their new era, enjoying the honeymoon period, and we're nearly 4 years into a project. But I also think there's something else, and the clue lies in the goals for and against columns, our only point of difference with Spurs this season. Despite the potential to go top of the table on Sunday if we finally beat City, no one would say Arsenal have been at their fluid best this season. If anything, after a disappointing loss in France midweek, I sense a real lack of enthusiasm in the fans I interact with on and offline, even pessimism. And as well as thinking about Bukayo Saka's ankles, we seem to be waiting for something to click, for us to finally put together those free-flowing attacking moves we saw and loved last season on a more consistent basis than they have been so far. Even if results are coming domestically, unbeaten as we are, performances still feel a little up and down. And without that click, I think Arsenal's wider perception is suffering. For example, against Bournemouth, ostensibly our best attacking performance of the season when you look at the scoreline, we actually had our worst game of the season so far in terms of possession sequences that ended up with the ball progressing into the final third. And with our XG at 3.6, with penalties broadly accepted to be around a 0.8 XG, that means we only created 2 XG in open play in a game it felt like we dominated. It shows we're clinical, which is great, but I know I personally still feel there's more to come. But when I look at our off-ball structure and numbers, which I feel have been the real star of the show this season, I'm wondering, has Arteta sacrificed that fluidity for security? We're waiting for that attacking click, but are we wasting our time? After all, as the saying goes, attack wins you games, but defence wins you titles. Let's look at the numbers. Arsenal have conceded 6 goals in the league so far this season, putting them only behind Man City with 5 in terms of the meanest defence. According to Opta, Arsenal have a total XG allowed of 6.1 after 7 league matches, less than a goal a game, which also puts us second best in the league behind you know who. Only 3 times this season have teams crossed the 1.0 threshold against us in terms of XG created. Palace just got there, but I think the game state massively affected that, as did Tottenham and Forest. In Arsenal's first 10 games of last season, they conceded 9.7 XG against, meaning we're on course to better that by about 1 XG in the first 10 games of this season, having actually played 1 more of the traditional top 6 than last season. Other stats make for encouraging reading too. For example, though sample size affects this of course, Arsenal made 22 errors leading to a shot last season and are only at 3 so far. Extrapolating that out over a season, that's just over 16 errors, a near enough 30% decrease. Right now, even if we're holding our breath on the attacking side of things, the defensive side looks really impressive. So, how has Arteta actually done it? Last season, Arsenal broadly defended in a nice 4-4-2 mid-block before springing into, usually, a man-for-man press or occasionally a zonal press when the ball went back. But this season, we've seen some nice adaptations and tweaks to that approach, more based on stopping approach play. And that's meant that teams have really struggled to build up against us. Fabio Vieira, though Odegaard chipped in a bit, played a game of don't let Basuma turn against Spurs. Arsenal ended up in more of a 3 shape than normal out of possession, and it meant that Spurs couldn't access Sarr or Maddison inside as much as they would have liked. It's a great tweak when you consider the 5th most progressive player in the league for passing so far this season is Basuma, with Maddison top. It forced Spurs wide and long, and though we ended up just giving it back to them half the time, so what was the point? That part of the plan really worked. Against United, we sat off a lot more. Our PPDA was up at 18.4, and it's been down as low as 6 this season. We were blocking the passing lanes into the 8s really well, getting in front of them and forcing Onana to try to pick players out ahead of the ball. I personally didn't like that approach from a fan perspective because I wanted to see us go after them, but I can't help but credit the efficacy of it. It really stopped United having basically any clear-cut chances that weren't transitions. But the reason that approach has worked so well is because of another principle that we've been really strong on, and that is the second ball. Forcing teams long is only going to work if you believe you can win the ball back more often than not, and we have been. We've been better on our aerials won this season, going from 46.5% to 48.2%, and we're actually the best in the league for ball recoveries made against us. Teams we've played have only recovered 303 balls against us so far this season, which works out of 43.3 per 90, down from 47.9 last season. No prizes for guessing who was first, with ironically 43.3 per 90 last season. But forget the stats. Use your eyes. Have there been long periods this season where we felt under the cosh? Sure, periods after the card against Palace, for example, but honestly, I felt pretty comfortable going backwards. It's also worth mentioning, collectively, we are much bigger than we used to be. Against Everton, we finished the game with 6 outfield players over 6 foot in Havertz, Tomiyasu, Rice, White, Gabriel, and Saliba. When you look at us in the tunnel, we look like big boys again. Big boys. Our press, which I've covered extensively in other videos, is functioning well as ever for the most part, with so many hard-working individuals across a rotating front three, but it's also worth saying that we're literally having to do less defending and therefore less pressing. When you remove the Palace anomaly with the red card, Arsenal are at nearly 64% possession on average so far this season, exactly the same numbers as Man City last season, by the way, and our field tilt numbers tell you we're playing much further up the pitch anyway. The best form of attack is defence and all that. We've done all this while being one of the cleanest teams in the league, equal third from bottom with 12 yellow cards. Spurs, by the way, have 26. But none of that systemic goodness happens without individuals pulling in the right direction. Sometimes I see fans getting angry about conceding chances or making errors, but let me tell you, we will concede chances and we will make errors. You better make your peace with it. It's part of football. What we need to do is reduce opposition chances and errors as much as possible, but also prepare for when we do give up opportunities. And that we've done very well. Saliba and Gabriel had 2 moments against Bournemouth in the first half that epitomise this. When you play this far up the pitch, the fact is you're asking your centre-backs to defend a lot of space in behind. Saliba is probably a top 5 or maybe even 3 defender in the world at defending that space in behind. And Gabriel is one of the best defenders in the world at protecting those wide channels when Zinchenko goes roaming. And while maybe a little less two-way in vertical terms than Saliba, is still top class at defending over his shoulder, as we saw. In front of them, we know Rice's qualities in terms of stopping transitions, blocking lanes, and shielding the defence. Altogether, they make an incredible unit. But I want to focus on 2 unsung heroes in this, Zinchenko and Havertz. I think Zinchenko has actually improved a lot on the defensive side this season. While against Lens, we saw them attacking down our left, when you look at Zinchenko's numbers, you can see he's just being bypassed. And for me, that's a structural issue about defending that side better and funneling them elsewhere. On an individual basis, though, I think his body positioning has improved, finding himself less square than he used to be and working on his positioning out of possession. If you listen closely through the Bournemouth game, you can hear Arteta coaching him throughout. In a sense, I'd compare Zinchenko to Per Mertesacker. Very different players, obviously, but both athletically challenged, shall we say, so need to adjust their body position to deal with situations before they occur, as they don't necessarily have the bodies to do emergency firefighting. There were a couple of situations against Bournemouth where Zinchenko read the pass early and stepped in to snuff out the danger, and broadly, I've been impressed with the defending he has had to do. He's always been a good front-footed defender in the opposition half, and we're now seeing that further back on the pitch. And secondly, Havertz. There's a whole video from an attacking sense, which I won't get into now, about what I think is going wrong, but from a defensive perspective, he's been strong. I don't want to overplay it, he's not changed the world and his height helps, but he's made the 3rd most tackles and interceptions in the whole team behind Saka and Rice, and lost only 2 challenges all season in the league, according to FBref, where for comparison, his midfield partner Martin Odegaard has lost 9, as they've challenged 11 and 13 dribblers respectively. Mikel himself has mentioned his contributions, his commitments, and how his qualities are coming out in many different ways, just not necessarily the most obvious ways. And if you don't want to take it from some curly-haired idiot on the internet, then take it from the Bournemouth coach speaking after the game.
I think they are a very, very good team out of possession. Very, very good team because they have the very good players they have. I'm thinking in Odegaard, in Havertz, in Declan Rice. They are very good without the ball in the press, in winning duels, second balls, and it gives them strength in the midfield, no? To try to recover high and attack from there, because also they have very good wingers to make the difference.
Maturing, in many senses, is recognizing that you aren't the center of the universe. It's understanding that everyone has different perceptions, skills, good days, bad days, and trying to understand why things are happening, not just what is happening. You can't control external perception, but as this team matures and we take a more pragmatic approach, maybe we can recognize collectively that although we would want to see something a little bit more exciting on the pitch, maybe this is where the team needs to be right now. It's a long season, it's a marathon, not a sprint. While it may not be the most sexy football, the off-ball stuff improving is an example of a team growing up and taking accountability. And it's an important part of this team's maturation. And as long as we keep getting results, then what it looks like goes to the back of my mind. If you like The Different Knock and want to see more, you can access our bonus content on Patreon and YouTube memberships for just £3 a month.